Welcome back. Right now we're going to be reviewing for the AP test and we're going to be reviewing Unit 2. So we're going to be looking at unemployment, inflation, and GDP. We're going to start with unemployment. Alright, in front of us here we have a table of labor data. We've got 100 people in the total population in this country, 45 people that are employed and have a job right now, 5 people that are unemployed and currently looking for a job, and 50 people that are not in the labor force. So I'm going to remind you a couple things. First, I'm going to show you how to calculate the labor force, then the labor force participation rate, then the unemployment rate. So first, let's look at the labor force. Remember, the labor force is made up of 2 parts. It's going to be people that are employed, those that currently have a job, and people that are unemployed and looking for a job. Remember, if you are not looking for a job, you do not count as being unemployed. At best, you're a discouraged worker if you looked for a job so long that you gave up looking. So we're going to calculate this real quick. We're going to take our employed people, 45 people in this country have a job, and we're going to add to that the unemployed and looking, the people that don't have a job but are currently trying to get a job. So it's going to be 45 plus 50. The labor force in this country is 50. We've got 50 people in this country that are part of the labor force. Now to calculate the labor force participation rate, it's going to be the labor force that we just calculated divided by the total adult population and then times 100. So we got 50 people that are part of this labor force. The total adult population is 100 people, 50 of which are not in the labor force. And so it's going to be the 50 in the labor force divided by the 100 people in the adult population times 100, and that is going to come out to 50% for this economy. 50% of the people in this country are participating in the labor force. Now finally, the most important part, getting our unemployment rate. The unemployment rate is going to be the amount of people that are unemployed and currently looking for work divided by the labor force times 100. We have 5 people that are unemployed and looking for work, and then we're going to take that and divide that by our 50 that is in the labor force that we calculated back at the beginning, and then we multiply that by 100, and that is going to come out to our unemployment rate. This country's unemployment rate is 10%. So what does that mean? It's hard to tell right away. We would have to know what the natural rate of unemployment is. Remember, the natural rate of unemployment is going to be the people that are frictionally unemployed, those that are in between jobs for any real reason, and then people that are structurally unemployed, people who have lost their jobs because maybe a robot replaced them or some sort of capital goods have replaced them, or their job moved somewhere else, maybe across borders. So if this country's natural unemployment rate was 5% and they currently have an unemployment rate of 10%, that would mean that they're in a recession and they're experiencing 5% cyclical unemployment. Next, we're going to talk about GDP and how to calculate it. There's a couple of different ways to calculate GDP. The 2 most important ways are going to be the expenditure approach, which I'm going to show you right here, and then I'm going to show you how to calculate nominal and real GDP when given a variety of goods and services that are sold in a country in a given year. So first, to calculate our GDP, we got to remember the formula. It's C plus I plus G plus X. So I'm going to write that down right now. C plus I plus G plus X. All you got to do is remember what each of these things stands for. C is going to be consumer spending. In this country, we have $500 in consumer spending this year. I'm going to write that up here. Next, we need I, which is going to be gross private investment spending, or the money that businesses are spending on capital goods and other machines and things like that. For this country, their investment spending is $400. And then we need G. G stands for government spending. Remember, for it to count as part of government spending, the government has to actually be receiving a good or service. So maybe buying a boat for the Navy or paying someone to build a school or a highway. So what we got here, this country has $300 in government spending, and then there's a couple things here that are designed to throw you off. One is Social Security, and the other is taxes. Both of these are transfer payments. Social Security are checks that go out to people that are retired. That's going to be money going out or transfer out from the government, and then taxes is a transfer coming in. Because there's no good or service being bought or sold here, it does not count as part of GDP. So for G, government spending, all we need is this $300 right here. Finally, we need our net exports. And our net exports are exports, things we sell to other countries around the world, minus our imports, things we buy from other countries around the world. And for this country, they've got $200 in exports, minus $400 in imports that they're buying from other countries, and that's going to come out to negative $200. 200 minus 400 is negative 200. Now we just got to add all this up. 500 plus 400 is going to come out to $900 plus the 300, that's 1,200 minus the 200, and that will come out to $1,000 in GDP for this country in this year. Now I'm going to show you the other way to calculate GDP. Next, we'll talk about the other way that we can calculate our nominal GDP and our real GDP and what the difference is between the two. Remember, nominal GDP is this year's output, or how much stuff we sold this year, in this year's prices, based on how much things cost in the year that we're looking at. Real GDP is the output for a given year times the price from a base year, a year that we've selected, that we've decided that we're going to pretend that prices never change from that year, which allows us to better compare between different years. So, this is a country that produces only two goods, cookies and lattes. This is data from 2019 and 2020. We're going to decide that 2019 is the base year, so I'm going to show you or remind you how to calculate our nominal GDP or real GDP and then the GDP deflator. To calculate our nominal GDP, it's a given year's output times the price that that good cost in the year that you're looking at. So for 2020, to calculate nominal GDP, we had 60 cookies of output, that's how much cookies we made that year, times $2, how much a cookie cost in that year. So 60 times 2 is going to come out to $120. And then we're going to add to that how much money we made off of lattes in that year. Again, the current year, the given year's output times the price from that year, because we're not adjusting for inflation, so it's 60 lattes times $5, and that's going to come out to $300. And so the nominal GDP for 2020 is $420. Now we're going to get the real GDP. To find real GDP, we take the same output. We're still looking at the same year, 2020's output, but now we're going to multiply it by the price in the base year. And for this example, 2019 is the base year. So we're going to pretend like prices never changed from 2019. So for real GDP for 2020, using 2019 as a base year, we take the 60 cookies that we made in 2020, but multiply it by how much they cost back in the base year. So it's 60 times 1, and that's going to be $60, and we're going to add to that however much lattes got us. That's going to be 60 times 4, and that comes out to $240, and together that equals $300. So our real GDP in 2020 was $300, even though our nominal GDP was $420. So the difference there is just the fact that prices have changed since the base year. Well, a cookie cost $1 in 2019, and in 2020 it cost $2. The price of the cookie doubled. We didn't have nearly as much inflation for lattes, but they still increased by a whole $1. So now we can use these two numbers to figure out what our GDP deflator is. And to find our GDP deflator, we take our nominal GDP, divide it by the real GDP, and then multiply it by 100. So 420 divided by 300 times 100 came out to 140. So our GDP deflator for 2020 is 140. I already know the GDP deflator for 2019 is 100 because that's the base year, and the base year is a lot like me. It always keeps it 100. And so now that I have these two deflators, I can actually use that to measure my inflation rate. It's that same old formula, just new value minus old value divided by the old value times 100. So between 2019 and 2020, 2020 is the new value. So it's going to be 140, our deflator from 2020, minus 100, the deflator from 2019, divided by 100 times 100, and that comes out to 40%. So we had a 40% increase in prices from 2019 to 2020, which is what accounts for that $120 difference between the nominal GDP and the real GDP. Now I'm going to show you another way that you might see inflation pop up on the AP test. Finally, we're going to cover inflation real quick. I'm going to remind you how to create a price index and then use that to measure inflation, and then remind you what that actually means. Remember, a price index like the CPI is going to be created by buying the same goods and services, the same exact quantity, the same quality of goods and service in one year, and then buy them again in a different year and measure the change in prices between the 2 years. And we can use that to measure inflation. The two goods we're going to be looking at right here is coffee and t-shirts. We're going to buy 10 coffees and 5 t-shirts in 2019, and then again in 2020, and measure the difference in prices between the 2 years. So first, to do this, we're going to use the base year of 2019. We got to calculate the 2020 price index. To get the price index for 2020, we're going to have to calculate the cost of a market basket for both of these years. So first, 2019's market basket cost is going to be the 10 coffee times the $1 price that they cost that year, so that's 10 bucks, plus the 5 t-shirts times the $20 price that they cost in 2019. So that's going to be $110. That is the cost of a market basket in 2019, and now we got to calculate the cost of the same market basket in 2020. So we're going to buy the 10 coffees again, but now the price is $2 because the price has increased since 2019. So 10 times 2 is $20, plus the 5 t-shirts times the new $25 price in 2020. So that is going to be $125 plus 20, that's $145. So we're taking the cost of the market basket in both these years, and then we're going to do some math now. So now, to get the price index for 2019, we don't have to do anything. The price index in 2019 is 100 because that's the base year. And remember, the base year always keeps it 100. Now, for 2020, we are going to take the cost of a market basket in the year that we're looking for. That's 2020, that's $145. And we're going to divide it by the cost of the same market basket in the base year. That's $110. So it's going to be 145 divided by 110 times 100. And that's going to come out to 131.8. I'll just round it up to 132. So in the base year, our price index is 100. In 2020, it's 132. So now we can use this price index to measure inflation between the 2 years. It's still that same old new value minus old value divided by the old value times 100. The new year between these 2 years is going to be 2020, so it's going to be the new value of 132 minus the old value of 100 divided by the old value of 100 times 100, and that comes out to a 32% increase in prices from 2019 to 2020. Now that we know the inflation rate between 2019 and 2020, we can figure out if an increase in nominal wages of 20% from 2019 to 2020 actually is a good thing. You might think at face value, I'm getting paid 20% more, that's great, I'm making more money. The only problem is your pay is going up by 20%, but prices are going up by 32%. So your real wages are actually 12% lower than they were last year. To find that, you would just take your increase in wages of 20%, subtract the increase in prices of 32%, you end up with negative 12%. That is your decrease in real wages. So even though you're making more money, that increase in money actually buys you less things. And so you're worse off. That's how inflation can affect people, everyday people. Other people that will be hurt by this big increase in prices are going to be anybody else that's on a fixed income, like people that receive Social Security and stuff like that. Anybody that owes money back to a bank is going to be better off, but the bank itself will be worse off as the money that they're getting paid back is worth less than they or the borrower thought it would be. That was Unit 2. Make sure you come back and look at the next video when I go over Unit 3. Goodbye!